Hey everyone, in this video I want to talk about the research that is discussing whether we should be stopping the use of our conventional mouthwashes. Now this might sound a little bit clickbaity, but I assure you it's really not. There is a significant amount of research discussing this question, with a significant amount of research showing us that unless there is a specific reason why we might want to use it, a lot of us should potentially be stopping our use of the typical mouthwashes that you'll be getting from the supermarket. And in this video, I'm going to explain why, sharing the research. But to truly understand this, we need to just take a step back and appreciate the importance of our oral microbiome. So the first thing to appreciate, I think, is that your oral microbiome is the second most abundant microbiome in the body after the gut's microbiome. Many of you will be very familiar with the importance of having a healthy, diverse gut microbiome. And I think this sort of statistic, the fact that the oral microbiome is the second most abundant microbiome in the body, straight away gives us a sense of just how important this ecosystem must be. Now, you would be forgiven for thinking that the oral microbiome is only influencing oral health. But we know in the research that this is not actually the case. So let's just look at some research to demonstrate what level of evidence we have here. So I'm going to share this paper to start with because I just love the first sentence of the paper. Scientific research in the medical field shows this constantly. Health starts from the mouth. We're at a point in time when thinking about oral health just within the context of preventing cavities and having fillings is outdated. We have to be thinking about our oral health within the context of our systemic health. Now, looking at a different paper and using an image that is in the paper, we can start to see what conditions have been associated with imbalances within the oral microbiome. So you can see cancer, Alzheimer's disease, inflammatory bowel disease, preterm birth. We can add colorectal cancer to this list as well, diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, and cardiovascular disease. They've all been associated via different mechanisms to imbalances within the oral microbiome. If we were to look at inflammatory bowel disease and colorectal cancer, there are two known mechanisms by which imbalances in the oral microbiome can contribute or lead to these two conditions. And in fact, there's a bacteria that often is cited as potentially the main trigger, and that is the bacteria Fusobacterium nucleatum. This is a pathogenic organism that can take hold in the oral cavity, the oral microbiome. And it can influence our gut health via one of two mechanisms. We might be swallowing it. We swallow liters of saliva every day. Some bacteria that are hardy enough to survive the stomach and the small intestine might end up in the large intestine, where they essentially trigger some kind of immune inflammatory response. The other one requires a little bit more context, and that is related to gum health. So we also know that certain pathogenic organisms are able to enter our circulatory system and our lymphatic system via leaky gums. Once in the circulatory or lymphatic system, they can be transported around the body and end up in the colon, and that could contribute to colorectal cancer. They could end up in the knee, contributing to rheumatoid arthritis. They could end up in the brain, contributing to Alzheimer's disease. So we're aware of some of the mechanisms that connect specific pathogenic organisms with specific systemic diseases. This image, just so I am giving the authors their credit, comes from this paper. But let's move on. Let's look at a specific pathway that strongly associates the oral microbiome with cardiovascular health, but also with cognitive performance or cognitive health as well. And that is the nitrate-nitrite-nitric oxide pathway. So this is relatively simple. I'm going to break this down. We eat nitrate in our diet. Nitrate can be found in dark green leafy vegetables like spinach and lettuce. It can also be found in beetroot. Nitrate gets converted to nitrite by specific bacteria found within the oral microbiome. Nitrite can then get converted to nitric oxide, and nitric oxide is a vasodilator. You can see in the introduction of this paper that nitric oxide is a potent vasodilator that regulates blood pressure and blood flow within tissues and organs. A high nitrate diet is associated with a reduced risk of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cognitive impairment, as increased nitric oxide bioavailability enhances the delivery of oxygen and nutrients to body systems. It helps with the delivery of oxygen to cells, and cells require oxygen and nutrients to work well. You can see in this image how this process works. Nitrate from food is converted to nitric oxide, to nitrate, nitrite, and then to nitric oxide. And then that can influence various elements of systemic health. Moving on from there, let's start looking at what happens when we use some of these mouthwashes. Now, in the research, most of the mouthwashes that have been used are chlorhexidine-based antiseptic mouthwashes. These are arguably the most common on the market. So look at this little part of the abstract. In general, elimination of oral bacteria with the use of chlorhexidine-based antiseptic mouthwash reduced the conversion of nitrate to nitrite and was accompanied in some studies by an increase in blood pressure in normotensive subjects. All that means is people that were using these mouthwashes had an increase in their blood pressure as a result of using it. The mouthwash impacted the oral microbiome, which impacted the ability of the oral microbiome to convert nitrate to nitrite. Let's look at another study. This was published 2019. Frequency of tongue cleaning impacts the human tongue microbiome composition and enterosalivary circulation of nitrate. Twice daily usage of the mouthwash was associated with a significant increase in systolic blood pressure after 1 week of use, and recovery from use resulted in an enrichment in nitrate-reducing bacteria on the tongue. Stopping the mouthwash led to an increase in the number of bacteria that do this conversion, convert the nitrate from our food to nitrite, which goes on to be converted to the nitric oxide. Individuals with relatively high levels of bacterial nitrate reductases had lower resting systolic blood pressure. The nitrite reductases are the enzymes found in or on the bacteria that allow the bacteria to do this conversion. So this is really powerful information. We can move on. There are dozens of studies that we could look at here. I think we'll finish with this one. Effects of chlorhexidine mouthwash on the oral microbiome. What's the conclusion? The mouthwash alters the composition of the oral microbiome. However, as chlorhexidine use remains widespread in dentistry to manage oral disease, urgent research using metagenomic studies of microbial communities in vivo are still needed to determine whether it's good, bad, or otherwise for bacteria in the context of oral and systemic health. Now, I might be wrong here, but this is in the Journal of Dentistry. They are going to be arguably more cautious, a little bit more conservative in their statements than people that aren't associated with the dental industry. This was published in 2021. As I say, we could keep going with the research. There are so many papers exploring this. The takeaway message is speak to your hygienist, speak to your dentists, consider whether you really need to use one of these mouthwashes, because there are occasions when you might choose to still use it, but that would be if you know that you have pathogenic organisms at elevated levels in your oral microbiome, and you're only going to know that if you've done an oral microbiome test. If you're interested in doing one of those, then simply contact us. Our email address is on our page. You can leave a comment below and reach out to me. I do try and get back to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. There are alternatives that you can use for mouthwashes as well, and I will add I'll add a link to this in the notes below this video. But there are companies that are offering I think more effective mouthwashes that are taking the oral microbiome into consideration, meaning you can still get that sense of having a really clean mouth and palate. You can still think about supporting breath if that's something that you're mindful of, but you won't have the alcohol in those, which is one of the things that might disrupt the oral microbiome. I hope you found this video helpful. As always, if you have any thoughts or questions, leave a comment below. If you have enjoyed this video, please give it a like, perhaps share it with a friend or family member or colleague. It all helps, I guess, motivate me to make more of these videos, if nothing else. Thanks everyone, and I'll be back very soon with another video.